Let's learn about the 5 pillars of emergent gameplay. What is the emergent gameplay, you're asking? That's when you have a lot of mechanics where the conflict and interactions between them actually lead to completely new behavior that you did not expect to be there. And sometimes that behavior surprises game designer themselves. So I'm Sir Fansi, and let's have a look at some emergent behavior here. Written by TinyBuild CEO Alex Nichiporchik shares advice on how to keep players invested in your game without making a 100-hour epic. TinyBuild is actually a very popular publisher. We looked here on stream on some of their games, and they actually seem quite legit. So let's try to learn about it. Players expect more from their games, now more than ever before. Over the past 20 years, the scope, budget, and audience expectations of games have inflated, and smaller studios are left seemingly locked in cycle of diminishing returns on increasingly ambitious productions. While tools have improved dramatically, allowing smaller teams to produce more graphically and mechanically complex games than ever before, producing equivalent experiences to AAA mega studios is still prohibitively expensive. True, I really hope AI is gonna help with that. I do believe it will, but it's still quite expensive. Savvy studios seeking a more immediate return on their investments might seek other and more cost-effective approach to game design. I think that's a very good point. You as a indie developer are not actually competing with AAA games. When players or gamers want to buy a indie game, they want to buy something very different than they want to buy a AAA game. That's something a lot of indie developers, I think, should realize and should be aware of. Look at other indie games that you are competing with. Not competing as in you have to beat them, but look at it rather as, okay, these kind of gamers like these kind of indie games. What can I learn from that? That tends to be a really good approach. Don't look at a Call of Duty and you're like, oh my god, I have to make a Call of Duty. You are not gonna do that. You are not even competing with them. Like someone who wants to buy Call of Duty is not gonna buy your game, no matter what you are gonna do. Someone who bought some other shooting interesting indie game may actually buy your game. So try to focus on them. That's my problem. I'm used to AAA and that is what I want to make. Not in range playtime, but in terms of quality. I understand that. It's good to try to get used to it. You may want to make something that's similar to AAA, but much shorter, for example, or much smaller in scope in some different way. So try to think about it in that way. How can you make something that's feels AAA to you, and what's important part of AAA to you, and try to see how you can make that in smaller scope that actually still communicates that experience. Maybe that's gonna help. Thrilling as a solo 10-hour-long campaign can be, linear content is expensive to produce. Telemetry and achievements also tell us that many players will stop playing long before the end, or even the halfway point. That's very true. Most players never see the end. That's a lot of development hours with increasingly diminishing returns. While your core audience will stick around to the end and want DLC, sequels, and more, there is no guarantee that they will stick around year upon year for the same kind of experience. It takes additional time and manpower to market those outward experiences to bring in fresh audiences. That's very true. That's exactly why you see so many indie games focusing on like roguelikes, infinite replayability. These kind of games work very, very well with early access. You can release it very fast and build it for community, and you don't have to build a lot of content pre-built for you, because that takes a lot of time. Someone actually made a Call of Duty with graphics slightly better than Minecraft, and it was really successful. But it learned from the code miscue, but that's not really competing with Call of Duty, right? It's competing with other shooters. And it's not necessarily, like, of course you can kind of do that, but it's to try that as a strategy, but it's risky. You're way less likely to succeed. And I would recommend it only to someone who has actually experienced and had some successful games. From survival sandboxes like Minecraft, Subnautica, and Ark Survival Evolved, to extraction shooters like Escape from Tarkov, to construction sandboxes like Space Engineers. These games provide players with a playground with a relatively open goal, and the verb and the game mechanics to find their fun and solutions to the problems presented. I'm just gonna a little bit explain here what verbs mean. In game design terms, verb or verbs are something that player does. So for example, shooting can be verb, moving around can be verb, exploring to some degree can be verb, or unlocking maybe. When you are talking about game mechanic, you are effectively talking about verbs. Those are tools that you give to your players to do something. There's quite a few interesting books about it. It's starting to be fairly common when the game designers talk about mechanics, so it's good to be aware what the term means. Marketing is a high barrier to breach when competing with AAA. That's very true. What you gotta realize, something really, really important to realize, guys, AAA games that tend to spend sometimes sometimes bigger budget on marketing than on development. So just realize that you have studio of 100 people that gets paid 2 years, let's say. It's a short game. 2 years, they develop the game. You have to pay 100 people for 2 years, and then the same amount of money or more is spent on marketing. You don't have that budget on marketing. Of course you don't. Focus on making a small game and compete with other indie games. It's a different design philosophy to standard AAA design, drawing on a separate talent pool. Very true. And different targets as well, different target audience. Those who grew up playing mods, creating, experimenting, and innovating within these social environments are leading the charge. Many of today's massive hits came from the modding scene. That's very true. The Counter-Strike was originally a mod for Half-Life. The Battle Royale genre, as we know it, started out as a mod for military simulation Arma 2, and evolved into the world-conquering force that is Fortnite, PUBG, and many other games. Game now rolling out its own set of tooling modding tools. UEFN, Epic, and others savvy studios understand the key truth here. We're competing for players' time, and one of the best ways to monopolize that is to create an ecosystem where creativity can thrive. Very important. You can see it on YouTube, right? That's why so many people just make React content, like me right now. Hello. Or anyone else just makes their user content. It's so cheap, so incredibly cheap to let players make content for other players. It's literally called network effect across social media. Like the more people you have on the network, the more valuable is it for all the new people and all the people there. Well, it's really, really important to realize that for something like Roblox. Why Roblox is cool, is interesting for people, even though the company is not quite doing what we would like it to do, is that it's a lot of people, a lot of small developers who are making games. And that's what makes it interesting, not because Roblox is some really cool game. MOBA came out of Warcraft. I do believe you are right, yes. You know what else is interesting? My second tab. Oh, really? What is that on my second tab? Oh my god, it's Lost Harmony. That's a game I'm working on. It's a small indie game because, as I just said, we should focus on making small indie game, and the game is quite cozy. A little game in the post-apocalyptic solarpunk world where you can learn about what happened to humans and interact with cute animals and just chill, and that's about it. My time is over here. Do wishlist it, and demo is coming out very soon, so be sure to check it out. I'm gonna let you know more about it. Even some of the oldest and most experienced AAA studios are pivoting to systemic emergent design and are banking on it for their marketing. When Nintendo put up the first major gameplay video for The Legends of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, it didn't show cutscenes, set pieces, new enemies, or other expensive, flashy assets. Instead, the sole focus was several new physics-driven sandbox elements. Yep, emergent gameplay. You let players make their own stuff. You know how it is. Just give someone a toy and he's gonna play with it forever, and give him like a single linear game and he's gonna finish it within the dedicated time. That was not a very good analogy, but hopefully you get the point. Freeform building, crafting custom weapons by sticking gear together, and new ways to traverse terrain, all adding multiplicative value to the entire game. Despite graphics that have barely improved since I can't remember. Zelda Back to the Wild? Oh my god, I have not played it yet, in my defense. Breath of the Wild. God damn it, I should know that. Despite graphics that have barely improved since Breath of the Wild release in 2017, players were buzzing with excitement. Yeah, but to be fair, they are releasing on the same hardware. It's all running on Switch, so it's kind of the same thing. Our own studio are working hard to leverage this style of game design. In particular, Secret Neighbor developer Holograph is currently working on Sand, unveiled during the PC gaming show back in June. An open-world multiplayer extraction-inspired sandbox with base building, freeform exploration, and PvP, making it a rich showcase of emergent design elements. Here is a few tips we have learned along the way, collaborating on this and other system-driven projects. Ooh, cool. We are getting here. Nicely structured. So far, this article is so much better than what we had before. It's amazing, actually. Really. Props to the Alex Nichipornik. Absolutely amazingly written article. Let's try to learn a bit more. Design systems, not content. Oh my god, yes! So true. That is a really good book. I have not fully read it yet. It's on my proper bookshelf. I'm definitely diving into it properly after I finish what I'm reading now. Advanced Game Design, Systemic Approach to Game Design. This book I have prepared. It's, from what I have heard, it's absolutely amazing for anything game design oriented. You can almost separate game design to two different structures. You have a game design that's made to expect specific behavior, and then game design, that's systemic design. But when you just design a lot of mechanics and you let those mechanics interact with each other. That's very much what I'm doing in Lost Harmony here, right? I have a bunch of animals that have their own meters for hunger, for how much they are tired, how much they are playful, etc., etc. And depending on these statistics, they are gonna try to interact with other animals. They're gonna try to move around. They're gonna try to find food. And by a lot of these different interactions, you end up having here things that I would never expect that would happen. But that makes it very interesting to observe these animals. This is just an example from my game, but you can probably point at any kind of a systemic game and find it. Probably the best example, most of this approach came from Will Wright with SimCity and The Sims, because those are the games that are by far the best examples of systemic design. Will Wright described it like this. I'm gonna kind of steal it. It's like these layers of system built on top of each other that can interact with each other, and depending on and because of their interaction, it causes some emerging behavior. It's very, very interesting. I would definitely recommend you diving into some of his GDC talks. This adds a lot of depth without much effort. Exactly. It adds so much depth that you can't quite really match it unless you have a huge team, which you don't, because you are not competing with AAA studios. The whole thing we are talking about. It's easy to fall into a trap of designing content that's designed only to be consumed once. While cutscenes and scripted events make for a great sizzle reel or trailer content, it's often better to think about how you might add an additional system to the game for players to engage with. If the player has access to 10 different items, consider how each of the player abilities might interact with them or how they might be combined into something new. See, mechanics interacting with each other. Already, you are looking at exponential increase in an engagement and possibilities of what player can do. And what's cool is that these possibilities will tell players to share this experience with someone else. Player will do something that he will think he's the only one who made it. Of course he's gonna share it online. Right? And if someone YouTuber comes into it, he's gonna get into this game because there is endless content to be made. This is really great for engagement and for actually sharing your game from marketing point of view as well. And adding just one more item doesn't just increase the amount of playable content by 10%, but might provide a whole new set of interesting synergies. Exactly. You are now all of a sudden you are not on a linear curve, but you are on exponential curve. If the basic building blocks are interesting enough to tinker with length, some players may even get dozens of hours of enjoyment out of experimenting with the limits of the systems you have built. With some foresight and careful consideration of what interaction verbs are available to player, new content can easily be slotted into the framework even late in development. True, if you design the systems like that with that in mind from the start, absolutely. Don't be scared of PvP. I'm scared of multiplayer. I don't know, networking is difficult, not gonna lie. While intimidating to some, we believe that player versus player gameplay is something that should be embraced. Looking back at the early multiplayer sandbox successes like DayZ and others in similar style, the tensions and unpredictability introduced by competitive multiplayer is the secret sauce that turns an already expressive sandbox game into something that's exciting and fresh every time it's played. So-called extraction games are the perfect intersection of system-driven design and multiplayer unpredictability. Let me finish it and I have some thoughts on that. Setting players loose on ostensibly PvE mission knowing that at any moment another player could interrupt and raise the stakes makes for a thrilling experience. Very true. It also changes the definition of what it means to win. One really important point with systemic game design, when you are designing for a specific content, with something specific in mind, you as a designer kind of decide the conditions to win. When you are designing a systemic game, you actually don't tell player the win condition. Very rarely you do. Player, while interacting with them, chooses their own victory conditions, or not even victory conditions, like what they would consider a success. Example of content design would be Doom, for example, like go there, kill everyone. Right. The example of systemic design would be again The Sims. That is technically goal to make as much money, but no one cares about that. People play The Sims because they have their own goal. Like someone wants to be really good at their job, someone wants to care of kids, someone wants to sink all the kings in the pool, or I don't know how you play The Sims. The point here is very much that with systemic games, you don't actually tell player what to do. You just show him what is possible and he will decide what is interesting. Really important to realize. I think in a huge degree, systemic game designs are future of interesting game designs. Content design is more like a linear experiences in movies. With other players around, completing the mission mission might become secondary to surviving, evading, or looting from your rival players, or running from your friends. That's usually how my multiplayer games look like. By allowing the PvE sandbox systems to interact unrestricted with the PvP, in the case of most extraction-style games, that's by allowing players to loot each other or have NPC unpredictably interrupt PvP encounters. You create opportunities for emergent storytelling and the kind of dramatic tales that players desperately want to share with friends. I agree with all of this. Very, very good points. I do think there are two things that should be considered. Making your game multiplayer, from technical point of view, increases the scope, not like 2 times, but like 10 times. If you know what you are doing and you have made multiplayer games before, just go ahead. But be aware that it increases the technical scope of the game a lot. And second reason, your game should not rely on being purely multiplayer. I made that mistake with one of the games I made for Quest. TTP, multiplayer game, 1 versus 1, to capture the flag. You could just like sculpt the terrain, you could build the buildings by yourself, you could destroy everything, and had like a spells, had like a earth bending skills and all that. The game completely flopped. No one really got to it. And the reason why is because it needed other players to be fun. Because to build the first base of players, you probably want a game that's fun by yourself, and it's fun by yourself enough that you tell your other friends they should join you. That's where you will see probably a lot of growth. That seems to be, in my opinion, the best way forward. Player skill is progression. Perhaps inspired by the rise of higher budget multiplayer sandboxes like Fortnite, we have observed that many younger gamers prefer not to have a game tell them when they are doing good or bad. Really? That's interesting. Instead, games with high skill ceiling allows players to express themselves and showcase their abilities against their peers. While a complex leveling system seems like an intuitive thing to include in a game, having player power determined entirely by hard-earned gear means that a player's skill might be visible at a glance far more than any statue. Interesting point. I actually have not thought about it. I think that's very interesting. Don't define what it means to win. If your game has a flexible definition of victory early on in the process, you are already halfway to designing something emergent. That's kind of what I mentioned before with systemic design, very likely the case. While especially evident in sandbox games, this can also be applied to other genres. Never tell players that they have won. Instead, encourage players to define their own victory conditions, although providing systems to make such goals seem official. That goes even deeper with that idea than I thought. Very, very interesting. Rewarding particular impressive player feeds with rare loot, trophies, or accolade that can be shown off to other players or displayed in player-made building, create immediate emotional attachment to those spoils of war. Something as simple as the option to display weapons on a wall might seem like a relatively trivial feature to add, but can add a whole new layer of satisfaction for players that have found success in mastering other areas of the game. That's true. I think it's important to let players show off their skill in some way, or their achievements. A dramatic boss fight and final cutscene has its own impact, but systems to let players define their own victories, then share and celebrate on their own terms is the heart of system-driven emergent game design. Implement procedural generation sparingly. One of the biggest cost-saving decisions in a system-driven game can be a procedurally generated content. Whether it's something as small as randomly placed monster spawns to complex multi-biome world generation like Minecraft. Algorithmic procedural generation can provide players with fresh experience every time they return. That's true. I think if you want to do just even something as simple as chest with a loot can spawn at 3 different locations is gonna make it more interesting, especially if you have something that player comes back to often, like dungeons or things like that. In the upcoming Send, that's the Send game again, Holograph have opted to only use procedural map generation for the Fansi overworld to make each expedition nominally distinct and provide some unpredictability to the most repeated actions in the game. But for the towns, where players will be congregating and fighting for loot, they have opted to handcraft each environment. I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good idea. Having some levels that keeps being repeated, procedurally generated, and then some levels being handcrafted. It also offers sort of variety to the player. That's pretty nice. In a competitive environment, other players become the dynamic and unpredictable element within a game. And having static environment that can be learned provides experienced player room to improve their skills and knowledge over multiple sessions. Very good point. Just talk with someone who loves CSGO or something like that. They are spending time learning the map from which point exactly throw a grenade to land at their exact location. There is a lot of value in that. And at that point, procedural generation would completely break it, right? closing thoughts. We are getting through it. This was an amazing article. I'm applauding already. While it requires a design skill set all its own, a lot of foresight early on in production, emergent game design can be an extremely cost-effective approach to development and immensely satisfying for an increasingly broad audience of players willing to make their own fun. With some foresight earlier in production and structuring the game for potential expansion, new systems, content, and environments can easily be added well after launch, adding value for existing players and making your game tempting for new customers. Define the rules of your game's world, but let players decide what game they are playing within it. Very good phrase. We can use some nice wise words. Emergent game design presents its own set of challenges and cannot be easily pivoted to from a game already deep in production. That's also true. From the very first design meetings, a clear vision needs to be established for what kind of experience an emergent game design is presenting to players and what their aspirational goals will be. Find the fun is a core tenet of game design. Very true. You've got to make the game fun. While an enjoyable 5-minute gameplay loop is absolutely key to aspire to, long-term engagement in system-driven games requires a careful planning, defining long-term hooks. Something that you hear talk about in a lot of game design circles, you have these engagement loops, or like fun gameplay loops, you can think about it, and you have multiple of them in different horizons. For example, you have a core gameplay loop that's usually within a few seconds to a few minutes. Like, what's the core thing that you do in Minecraft? Like walk around, either build or like that's, I guess, even walk around and like break stuff. Right? Then you have a little bit bigger gameplay loop. It's like walk around and actually put stuff down and build it. And this can be from 5 to 15 minutes loop. And then you have like build actual buildings, and now all of a sudden you are like a gameplay loop that takes 15 to 20 minutes, and you build many of these long and huge gameplay loops. So for games that are, for example, idle games or mobile games, these gameplay loops can be weeks long. It's actually quite interesting. Definitely looking into gameplay loops and how they are layering on top of each other could probably help you a lot with designing game. Some of them are long term, some of them are short term, and they are all nicely stacking on top of each other. Give players something to aspire to in their first hour. That's kind of what I was talking about. Really make it, dude, this is literally what I just said. Exactly. Make the challenges change as you continue progress through the game. Give players something to aspire to in their first hour, then their first 10, then 50, then give them a goal to shoot for in 100 or even 200 hours of play. Then give them the tools and the means to achieve it by their own choice of path. The players that race to the top will be the ones to showcase the true potential of your game, and the ones to bring more players into the fold. Again, makes good marketing material for you as well. Define the rules of your game's world and then let players decide what they are playing with it. Okay, amazing article, Alex Nichiporchik. Thank you very much for writing it. This was a lot of really good knowledge. I'm gonna put it for all of you guys who are watching on YouTube in the description. You should definitely check it out, take some notes. This is amazing knowledge. I can only put my thumbs up on that. And if you wanna spend some time, press the like button and Wishlist Lost Harmony. You can find it in the description as well. Alright, see ya.